Make that big boss less special. It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level. Second level gaming. Second level.
Hello, Internet, and welcome back, or welcome to, if you're new, to the official Level... I almost said, Indy, please add details. The official Level 2 podcast, episode 41.
That's what happens when you don't have notes.
Yeah, that's what happens when you don't have notes. Thomas is yelling at me I didn't have notes. My name's Keegan, one half of Level 2 Gamers, hanging out with the British biscuit himself, Tom.
British biscuit.
How you doing today, Tom?
It's better than bangers and mash, I suppose. I'm all right. I'm not doing too bad.
It's an English muffin, but not an English muffin.
I am an English muffin. An English stud muffin.
Without being an English muffin.
No, I'm a little gravelly voiced for some reason, but other than that, I'm doing grand.
That's good. I've been feeling a little bit woozy. I don't know. Halfway through the recording last podcast,
It's been real hot in here.
Yeah, dude.
Today.
We walked like 15 steps to the other room, and it was just like it's the lights, and it's also hot outside.
It's a little bit of the lights, and it's still 92 degrees at the end of September in St. Louis. So, you know,
it means it's gonna snow real heavy at some point.
I guess
that's how that because it's gonna flip on its head. But the Level 2 podcast, official Level 2 podcast, if you don't know, is where we pick a topic, talk about it. In the middle, we do something fun. This week, I'm going to have a story for you guys, and then...
Getting to know all about
I don't know that song.
Yeah, I didn't think you...
And then at the end, we'll have your topic, and that is the official Level 2 podcast. So without further ado...
Summarized.
Let's go. Let's get into it.
Let's go.
So... I didn't have anything planned as per usual, I feel like, is the common thing for us is like, fuck, we got to come up with something.
Where we get to do whatever we want,
so I had a couple things. I was going to potentially talk about bipolar disorder, and I was like, I don't want to do that right now. That'll be a future topic I want to talk about, but I want to get my research done correctly and my thoughts in order before I do that.
Fair enough.
So what we're going to talk about this week for Keegan's Corner is I've been watching the CNN documentary series. I think it's called The History of Comedy. Not 100% sure what it's called, but basically it goes through the history of comedy in different segments and sections. So the two that I remember vividly that are probably my favorite ones is the history of comedy, and it is Spark of Madness, I think was the name of the episode, where they talk about being Robin Williams and a little insane and people like that, where like you have to be a little crazy, a little depressed, a little off the wall, a little out of the norm to do it.
Yeah.
And then the other one they had, I can't remember the name of the episode, but it was about women in comedy. And then the third one, can't remember the name, but it was about profanity in comedy. So have you seen these documentaries?
No, but I want to.
If you have the CNN app, CNN Go on Apple TV, or I'm assuming potentially on their website. I didn't
Do you
even
need to
look.
have like a cable subscription?
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know.
I stole my parents to watch it.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're on YouTube. Let's be honest. They're somewhere. They're somewhere on there on the internet.
Put my eye patch on.
But basically what they did was they go through and they pick a topic and talk about how that form of comedy came about, what early comedians influenced it, and then how it got to where it is today. Mm-hmm. And they have both comedians and celebrities talk about it. I think Tom Hanks was actually the producer of the series, which he's done a lot of CNN stuff.
Yeah, he did all those like 70s, 80s, and 90s shows.
Yeah, which I love those too. I'm currently finishing the 90s now.
90s is great.
I have 2 more in that, I think, to watch.
It's sad because that's the only one that I'm like fully aware of everything they're talking about.
I'm not, but I remember a lot of it. Yeah. So like the early 90s I don't remember because I was a baby.
I liked all the Alanis Morissette stuff. I was a massive fan of Jagged
It's like rage on your wedding day. But anyway, so the one I wanted, the episode I specifically, the 3 I want to talk about is the female one, the profanity one, and the Spark of Madness. I'm going to start with Spark of Madness because it's the one that probably hits me the most personal. Okay. Because I feel like sometimes I'm a little bit mad in my head, and I feel like sometimes I'm not quite the same as everybody else, if that makes sense. And I know most people aren't, but they use the way they ended the episode. And the Spark of Madness, just where they got the name from, was Robin Williams in an interview one time was asked, I think it might have been on Charlie Rose, was asked about kind of what it's like to be Robin Williams. He goes, well, first of all, the first rule of being Robin Williams is you can't do anything, you can't do the thing people expect you to do. Second of all, you have to have a little bit of spark of madness to keep going in life. Third thing is you got to make people laugh. And those are the 3 things that was his answer for it. And I was like, that is so true.
A little bit sad that his spark of madness didn't last long enough.
Yeah. So by the end of it, they come in and they talk about Robin Williams' passing and kind of why the people who knew him weren't surprised by it, and it's weird to think because that was what 3 years ago now, 2 years ago.
Comedians in general, I think, are a depressive group. Like I feel like I have some familiarity with this topic. I've been an avid stand-up comedian fan for years and years and years.
Who's your favorite? Like, if you had to pick one,
like old time or current?
Let's do both. Who's your
old
current?
time? Bill Hicks.
Okay. Who's your current?
Current. Ooh, it's a bit of a toss-up. I would say probably Louis C.K. I know there's been some weird stuff in the news about him and the ladies recently, but I think Louis C.K. Because I love dark humor, and like the darker the better. Like seriously, you can't offend me with any humor. Yeah. But Louis C.K. does that perfectly. Like he opens the latest, his newest stand-up at time of recording is one called 2017, and it's just about like how he was talking about religions and how Christianity won. And he was like, Christianity won, guys. Christianity won. Like, let's not beat around the bush. Christianity won religion. Do you know how I know? What year is it? Like the audience is like, oh yeah, I suppose. Like he goes, even you ask a Muslim guy or whatever, it's 2017. Like there's obviously like some missed ones, but I just thought that was really really funny. But then he's an atheist, so he doesn't give a shit. But he started the whole thing just like with an abortion joke and like talking about babies. And
it's one of those things. Like, I feel like they come out and they have to start with something like that to get you prepared.
It was brutal, and so him and I really really like David Cross too. You know David Cross?
Yeah.
I've
never listened to him, but I know who he is.
His last stand-up that he did was phenomenal. It was all about like politics and stuff, which a lot of it is nowadays.
Yeah,
but
because it's an easy target.
Yeah, but he's. I used to watch there's an old documentary on David Cross where it shows him going to like this just bumfuck nowhere comedy clubs and
well, there's the story of Jim Carrey sleeping on a couch for the longest time when he got started. Like things like this.
He would get like chased out of these places because he was a liberal comic and he would go do it in like Alabama and like dude like that's not your audience.
Yeah.
But he didn't give a shit because he just wanted gigs anywhere he could get them. And then, and then now to see him like with Netflix specials and like people like
I feel like Netflix specials have become what the Comedy Central specials used to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is kind of weird to look at.
And they're good. And there's so many different brands, isn't there? Because there's the dark humorists. There's the people that are just super like whip snappy smart, like John Mulaney is like whip snappy smart.
See, my favorite comedian, I have two all time. I guess one's technically a group, but George Carlin, which is kind of what I've been listening to all of his stuff. It's funny because I know him as Mr. Conductor first, and I was listening today on the ride here. He was going through one of his albums, and he was talking about like how we fuck up kids. And like how kids are like evil, and he goes, "This is coming from Mr. Conductor, so I know." And I was like, "God, I love that." So he's probably one of the people that I absolutely love. Him, and then the Blue Collar Comedy Tour. Like I grew up listening to
the Rednecks, huh?
Yeah, the Larry the Cable Guy, Jeff Foxworthy, Bill Engvall. And Ron White. I wasn't a big Ron White fan.
Ron White is my favorite.
I was not a big Ron White fan. Yeah. I think it's partially because I grew up in a family that kind of was like that, like my mom's side. I don't want to call them rednecks because they're not rednecks, but they had some of those traits. And you're like, okay, that makes sense. And it's one of those things, too, where just like, it's stupid humor. I love stupid shit.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that inherently. Like the blue collar stuff obviously has a particular audience, especially with like Larry the Cable Guy and that kind of stuff. Like
Get her done.
That guy's kind of fucking stupid. But
I remember when he started making movies and was like becoming a movie star.
Yeah.
That was weird. That was a moment I was like, what the hell is happening?
For a short period in my life, when I moved to America, I learned about Larry the Cable Guy, and I knew nothing about him before. And I picked up a few of his DVDs, and
you should watch Larry the Cable Guy Made in America.
I'm sure I've seen a lot of his stuff.
It's not a stand-up comedy. It's a TV show. I think he did for Travel Channel,
I didn't see
it's either Travel Channel or Discovery. I can't remember which, or TLC. One of those channels. And it was really good. I was like, why is Larry the Cable Guy hosting this? But then you realize he injects the comedy into what he's doing. So like, there's an episode.
He's a fucking goofball. But he's like, I understand that that's enjoyable.
So him, and then current one that I absolutely cannot like get enough of is Gabriel Iglesias, because it reminds me. I used to be.
That's I'm not fat. I'm fluffy. Guy.
Yeah. Okay. It's I'm fluffy. The 6 levels of fat. The added one because it's damn, and that's what happens when you get on an elevator and people are like, no, damn, he's too big. I also was a Carlos Mencia fan back in the day, and then he did some things that I'm like,
Yeah, good old Carlos Mencia. That whole thing was super interesting because I used to listen to Jay Moore's podcast, and he would talk a lot about that from like an inside point of view because he got accused of some of the same things with like biting people's jokes and stuff like that. But Joe Rogan calling out Carlos Mencia, and Joe Rogan is fucking phenomenal as a talk about a guy who is
I know him as Fear Factor. That's all I know about him.
Fear Factor. I didn't
UFC,
watch him on
right?
that.
He does UFC as well, right?
The best UFC commentator. His podcasts are phenomenal. He's such a smart guy and so open-minded. But then the actual his actual stand-up, even though it's a little bit broy, it's a little bit broed out, is funny and it's really enjoyable.
And one of the things, so getting back to the CNN stuff and kind of where this came from, was one of the things I found very interesting is each episode definitely was like you said, there's different genres or brands or whatever you want to call it of comedy that kind of fell into a certain hole. And all these comedians were talking about I can't remember who it was. It's like I'd go on stage, I'd make my first joke and wait for people to leave because then we could laugh.
Gotcha.
And he's like, my goal was not to offend anybody, but my goal was to see who was going to be with me along on this ride. And they also talk about how the scariest moment is when you have new material and you use it for the first time, and there's like that half second of like, are they going to laugh?
Yeah.
And I hope they do.
Have you ever considered it? Doing it?
No, I don't think
I've considered it.
I would do like a YouTube controlled type thing, like an online one. I don't think. Yeah, I don't. Well, I think I'm funny to a certain extent, but I don't think I'm good at coming up with jokes. I feel like I have the comebacks and like the stupid shit I say could be funny, but I don't know if that's just because my friends
just framing jokes by themselves.
One of the things that both James and David get a kick out of is, and you've been there, is I sing all the time when I play video games. Like I will come up with these random ass songs, and I can't remember we were playing Destiny doing something. And I can't remember what I said, but we all just lost it because of the lyrics. Like, I'm coming off this at the top of my head. And as I do with everything in life, I don't have anything planned out. And I was like, oh, that was actually quite good. You have those moments. But I don't think I could sit down and be like, is this funny? Is this not? I don't know. It's funny, so subjective.
Yeah, it is subjective, but also it depends on what type of comedy you want to do, like we said, because you have your comedians like Louis C.K. that probably sit there and just start in a dark place and build out from it.
I could see me
doing
a
lot of observational stuff.
I could be a Jeff Dunham, I think. I would be good as a character. I can't ventriloquize. Yeah, I'd be a character comedian, essentially. Gotcha. I could do that. I could not do the Richard Pryor talk about my life. I could not do
That's the one I would rather do if I was given a choice.
I couldn't do, George Carlin is, the reason I love him so much is, I don't know what part of him to believe, but he's so good with wordplay and the words he uses, and they always seem to have a meaning or a double meaning or whatever, that I'm envious of that, because my English is not my strong suit. I've always said I've been a math person, so it's kind of interesting. Like the stuff he comes up with is like, oh, like there was one. He came up with one for a name for a gay bar, and it was like, I think it was called, because he's talking about how everything's like one word and it doesn't tell you what it is. So it's like rumors or whatever it may be, and he's like, what about like mouthful? And he's like, y'all didn't come up with that. So things like that, because the joke was things that make the words that tell you what's going on inside.
Gotcha.
So I don't know. I would definitely be a character. I love doing voices. It's a thing I've always enjoyed. But
do you watch to sort of hijack a separate part of this talk, but a similar principle? Maria Bamford.
No.
So Maria Bamford is female, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
She has a similar thing where I genuinely don't know if she's a character or not.
If that's her.
Yeah, because when she's on stage, she acts like she's absolutely like imbecilic and can't string two sentences together. But when you see her talking normally, sometimes I think genuinely she has the madness.
Well, let's it's kind of like we are. When people watch us, they see only a certain part of us. And the same thing when you're on stage, you only see a certain part. There's more aspects to people that go on. And that's why it's weird with like internet celebrity or any celebrity in general. You think you know that person and you know one aspect of their life.
Yeah, you know what they're showing you.
So, yeah. So it's quite interesting with that kind of aspect. But there are people, there is always a truth behind who's on stage. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe that like Robin Williams, with him talking, I identify a lot with Robin Williams because he talks quick, he does voices, he gets distracted, and he'll just do stupid shit with like objects around him. And I love that kind of thing because it reminds me of me, where I'll go bouncing off the walls and be like, oh, here we go. Also, I didn't realize Robin Williams was as profane as he was because I knew him as the genie initially, and then when I found out,
His stand-up is fucking.
yeah, when I found out his stand-up, I was like, ooh, I loved it though.
stand-up
It just was not when you have the genie in your head, and then you have Robin Williams doing this. It's like, hold up,
like vagina noises into his armpit.
So.
I like the smart stuff. I like I don't mind dumb stuff if it's storytelling. So like Aziz Ansari, have you seen Aziz Ansari?
Yep.
I love
Not a
that
huge
he
fan,
just
but-
tells stories of like hanging out with like Jay-Z and stuff because like from a normal person's viewpoint, because that's stuff that you never get to hear, despite all the kind of let's say controversy around her right now. Kathy Griffin was similar to that as well. She would tell stories of that time she was with Oprah, or that time that she's, that type of stuff is super interesting.
Do you listen to? Do you know Dimitri Martin?
Yeah.
Do you like his stuff? Because he's another
okay.
he's another one of those wordplay guys that I'm
He's
like
proppy. I don't like the proppy stuff. But
see, my favorite was skit he's ever done was he has a chart, and it's a graph that just goes from bottom left to top right on a curve. So it's the how hot the girl is versus how much you care about her cat. He goes, at some point, I don't care how hot you are, I just don't care about your cat anymore.
Yeah, Dimitri is very funny, very quick-witted. I don't hate the props. He doesn't use them to like Carrot Top or whatever. But but he does rely quite heavily on them. I really do like Bo Burnham.
Never watched it. I know who he is, but I've never watched his stuff.
Well, Bo Burnham is a musical comedian, so he will crack some jokes in the middle of songs, but the songs are the jokes. So it's like Ninja Sex Party or whatever. And but
I love me some dick jokes. I don't know what it is about.
His stage presence is unreal. It really is. Like the last stand-up that he did when he did like how to do a modern country song and that kind of stuff, and he did this Kanye thing at the end. But like you can kind of tell just by like, especially from the last stand-up that Bo Burnham did, that the dude is depressed. Like there's something about him that is not all there. You can see it just by like how he's talking to the audience. But I also like really snappy stuff, the one-liner stuff. So were you familiar with Mitch Hedberg? Mitch Hedberg is one of my, like, he is second to Bill Hicks in like my line of comedians that I really enjoy, just simply because that dude, like, he just sat there stoned out of his mind, or heroin or whatever the fuck he was doing, and was just coming up with the stupidest shit. Like I imagine to be around him in a general party setting would be just perfect, like just so snappy and funny.
One of the ones that I found really interesting from the documentary was the female one, because I realized I don't watch too many female comedians. And Sarah Silverman was the one she was the one featured there, like talking about it as well. Okay. And there's a few other, but it was funny because she's like, the hardest part for them is breaking the barrier that you can talk about your vagina. Same way a dude can talk about his dick or
I don't know
having
if I
sex.
think that's a barrier. I just think that here's the thing. Like, I'm torn on the female comedian thing, and this is a shitty thing to say, but I don't find a lot of them funny, and it's nothing personal. It's just that the ones that I come into contact with, or that I have given a chance, have rarely made me like really, really like just lose it. I really enjoy Kathleen Madigan. She's from St. Louis. She's really funny. I've gone to see her live. I really enjoy Maria Bamford. I like Sarah Silverman, but sometimes she's just not funny to me.
Yeah, she's too, like, I don't know what the word is, but she's just kind of like just there.
There's this weird divisiveness that I have, like, because like Amy Schumer, right? Amy Schumer, sometimes she'll do something and I think, that's funny. Then I watch her stand up, that one that got like panned by the alt-right or whatever, and I was just like, I'm gonna give it a chance. I'll see if I like it, and I fucking hated it. And it wasn't because of any like political stuff whatsoever, because I'm as far fucking left leaning as possible.
And all that kind of
I just didn't think she was funny, and I was just like, there's ways and means, and like in movies and stuff she might be funny, but in that particular setting, the jokes that she was making were not funny to me at all, and it's just they weren't smart enough. I love Janine Garofalo. She's really good. I like smart female comics. I don't necessarily like the sort of the slapsticky ones, but then I don't really like the slapsticky ones and the male ones either. So I just think there's less like super critical, smart, depressive female comics, which is the style that I like the best.
Yeah. And then the last thing I want to talk about is one of the episodes was about profanity. Yeah. And the use of profanity, because back in the day when you were on
you can't say on television.
Well, fun fact about that, George Carlin made that up. That is not a real thing, and then it became a real thing. Do you know the 7 words?
I do.
What are they?
Well, I don't remember the actual words, but I remember that whole piece.
Oh, it's shit, piss, fuck, cock, motherfucker, No, shit, piss, fuck, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits. Right?
That's
shit,
7, but I feel like you're
piss.
missing a big C word in there somewhere.
Shit, piss, cock. No, it's shit, piss, fuck, cocksucker, motherfucker, something in tits.
There's no cunt in there anyway?
Cock, no.
Really?
No.
You definitely can't say that on TV.
No, you definitely can't say that.
You could say it on a podcast. You can't say it on TV.
I won't say. That's one word I won't say. I'm going to see if I can find it here to make sure.
Very, very different in English culture than it is over here. I've used it a few times over here and got severe backlash from doing it.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
But it's funny because that came out because of this. It wasn't a thing before. He's like, what? Because he did it in rhythm, and that's why people liked it, because the rhythm of how he did it.
Easy to remember.
It is shit, piss, fuck. No, it is. Cot, sucker, motherfucker, tits.
Told you it'd be there somewhere.
In 1972.
God, it's so ahead of his time.
God, man. Mr. Conductor, everybody. Mr. Conductor.
But yeah, he was awesome.
So
his daughter does it now. Do you know? I think his daughter was on the
that.
Jay Moore show, the podcast, and she was talking about how she's like following in his.
It's got to be so hard to follow in his footsteps.
Oh
though.
yeah, absolutely. But.
So the other person they mentioned a lot, obviously, is Richard Pryor when it comes to using
Barriers.
profanity, and I'm gonna admit I never watched Richard Pryor. I guess I just don't really identify with him. Partially because of what he talks about. I've never had to experience any of the things he talks about, but he uses it as therapy. And he had his daughter talking about how her dad was so messed up and used comedy to deal with everything. And it was quite interesting to hear from and it made me want to go and actually listen to it. Just to see, because like I said,
he's a legend for more than one reason. Obviously, he was one of the first sort of black comedians to break through to the mainstream, but also he comes from the era of Mel Brooks movies where, dropping in an N-word into the movie was not an uncommon thing for laughs. And to go from being like the token black guy in a bunch of movies to having his own time on stage to really say what he wanted to say was just brilliant. And I think he used it perfectly. He was genuinely funny. And that was Eddie Murphy was genuinely funny.
I was going to say, that was the weird thing, because he's donkey to me.
Yeah.
But one of the weird things to me was like with Richard Pryor, when you watch him, again, it's the same thing with George Carlin. I don't think Richard Pryor, based on the clips they showed, I mean, George Carlin knew a little bit more about, they didn't use profanity to make it a point. It wasn't like they did the profanity wasn't
just to do it.
The profanity wasn't the joke.
Yeah. It
was part of a joke.
Yeah.
And the only time I think the profanity, like obviously with the 7 dirty words, that was the whole joke, is things you can't say on TV. But again, I think it's the rhythmatic approach he brought to it of like, these are the things you can't say. And it was quite interesting hearing their perspective of different interviews they did. Because George Carlin, I don't know if you know this, but he used to be on Ed Sullivan a lot. There's a picture of a cleaned up George Carlin.
He was on SNL a lot as well. Like way back.
In a suit and all this kind of stuff.
Wasn't he like the first host?
I don't know.
Something like that.
But George Carlin is George Carlin in a suit on Ed Sullivan, and it was not George Carlin. And he talked about how that wasn't him. He's like, there's a video of him standing next to a cardboard cutout of himself later on in life, and he goes, "This guy made me a lot of money. This guy helped make me a household name. I don't know who this guy is."
Yeah.
And he's like, "What it is?" And he turns him sideways. He goes, "There's no substance to him. He's flat." And he's like, I found out when I found my brand of comedy and what he ended up becoming. He goes, that's when I felt whole. I felt happy. He's like, I had all this money. I didn't care about that. He's like, I just wanted to feel like I could be myself.
It was cathartic for him. Which I think is the thing for a lot of comedians, is that there is a catharsis to it, where it's just like all these kind of horrible, twisted things that I really want to say. If I say them out loud, people might laugh at them. And it gives them a way to get their demons out, so to speak. Yeah. Bill Hicks, similar principle. He used to talk about a lot of politically charged things. Poor dude died of cancer way too young. But
do you know Josh Blue? The cerebral palsy guy?
Yeah.
I think he won Last Comic Standing or some sort of competition.
He's really fun.
It's going to sound really bad when I say this, but I love people that can make fun of themselves when they know they have something wrong. Because it's a defensive mechanism, and here's psychology for you, but it's a defensive mechanism, so obviously he has cerebral palsy. People point it out to him, I'm sure, all the time, or he has things that happen because he can't control his movement sometimes. But he'll make a joke about it. So like for me, one of the things I use as a defense mechanism is I do voices. And here's about to get open up. I'm a very insecure person. I like to show or have some sort of front that I'm like, okay, I'm with it. Like everybody else, you want to show that you're in control, but nobody's ever fucking in control ever. Nope. And I used voices as like a comedic way of like deflecting stuff. And to me, it's fun because you make people laugh. Like, you know, me and Wheezy, you put us in a room together, we will do voices to each other all day long, and it's hysterical, but people look at us like we're giant children. But I don't care because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's cathartic.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, with that, or I'm trying to think who the other one was that I watched, that he would always talk about something in his life. I mean, Gabriel Iglesias is a prime example. He's a big dude. He's like, I know I'm fat. He's lost a bunch of weight recently. He actually stopped a tour to lose some weight because it got to the point where it was affecting his life. Yeah. And he's like, there's a difference between joking about being fat and being fat and super unhealthy.
Well, there's a level of laughing at yourself that you have to be comfortable with if you're a comedian, because even people like Joe Rogan, who's like a perfect specimen of man. Yeah. You know, he's super healthy, like he's an MMA fighter, but he will joke about the fact he's such a bro, like at certain times, because he's actually a really smart guy. So, you know, when he does have his bro out moments, he'll kind of like joke about the fact that he's such a bro. And it's kind of, even if it's like the smallest insecurity.
And it's self-awareness of two things. Like for me, one of the things that some of the groups of friends, because I'm religious, as you know, and I have no issue with religion jokes. Obviously some of them I think could potentially cross the lines, but in general, I'm my firm belief on, I guess, freedom of speech, is what this all falls under, is you're allowed to say whatever you want. There are consequences for what you say. As long as you're not hurting somebody's person or property, you can say or do whatever you want. And religious jokes, like George Carlin, when I tell some of my church friends that, like, I love George Carlin's jokes, and I'll tell them some of the ones he talks about, and they're like, really? I was like, yeah, if you can't laugh at it, like, you have to understand how stupid. Like the one on the way here, he's like, you know why Christianity is the way it is? Because it's the best story ever. He went on this rant about like how there's famine and disease and all this, but he goes, but he loves you. At the end, I was like, oh my God, yes. Like it's so weird, but I'm still a believer because of different things.
The Joe Pesci as God part that George Carlin has when he talks about how God would be so much more effective if Joe Pesci was God. He's just like, hey, what the fuck are you doing?
Well, that's also like the same joke. He goes, you know how I know God is a man and not a woman? Because a woman will not fuck it up as bad as this. So
a lot of comedians are atheists. It's interesting to see the ones that aren't and how they handle it. Like people like Jim Jeffries, Australian comic. Again, lots of solo stories, but also a lot of like anti-politic, anti-religion stuff. But then you have people like Cat Williams. Cat Williams completely... I am almost ashamed to say that I changed some of my opinion on him based upon some of the things that he brought into his comedy, which is such a hypocritical thing for me to say. But Cat Williams, I was a gigantic fan of Cat Williams' comedy, and then he had one stand-up special where he basically just denied evolution in the special, and just said like something along the lines of like, if you believe in evolution, you're a stupid motherfucker, and then starts to talk about how like creationism is all this stuff. And you know, I was watching it and I was like, I was trying to just kind of chuckle along and take the joke as an atheist. I feel like I laugh at enough religious jokes that I should be able to laugh at that. Yeah. But like a little part of me was like, did that motherfucker really just say that? Yeah. Like, how stupid.
Well, that's like,
you know,
I can't remember who the comedian is, but one of my favorite atheist joke was it was a dude that was like, you know how you do the talk back and forth to yourself? And he's like, I walked up to an atheist one time and asked him what happens when he dies. He goes, I don't know. I think I get buried in the ground. He goes, oh, you become a tree? Yeah, I become a tree. Cool. Can I chop you down when you're a tree? Yeah, you can chop me down when you're a tree. Can I make you into paper? Cool. Can I burn you? And like stuff like that. And I was like, okay, that escalated. But to me, that is one of my favorite bits of back and forth, because it was, again, you laugh at religious jokes, you laugh at atheist. I think nothing's off topic. Some things are in poor taste. Like, I think there's timing to certain things.
Hate speech, I think, is the only exception to that. Like, don't go up on stage and start dropping the N-word and being just a hateful piece of shit. Like, outside of that...
If you're using it to get a reaction, I don't agree with it, but I agree with the right to do it. I mean, that's where I stand on it.
I think hate speech versus freedom of speech is kind of the whole debate, isn't it? So we won't get into that.
So, but it was I just loved it because it's like, as somebody who grew up in a religious family, like, you have this set pathway. It is like, if you're atheist, what happens? Oh, I get buried in the ground. Then I become the soil, and then I grow a tree, and I get chopped down, and I become paper, and then it was just whatever reason I found that quite hysterical, because I've never thought about it. Like, oh yeah. Like,
there's some really good stuff out there. Like, I love jokes about reincarnation and things like that. And but yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing because the comedians, sometimes comedians will hit everybody, and
Yes.
they hit them in such a way that like you've been laughing at the jokes about Chinese people, you've been laughing at the jokes about black people, you've been laughing at the jokes about Mexican people, and then when they do like a white joke, you'll just be like, okay, like, and I can take that far easier than I can take the atheist ones, just because I think a lot of that stuff, to me anyway, is like born of ignorance, and I'm just kind of like,
my
weird,
favorite stand-up bit, I can't remember who it was, but there was a moment where this guy, he kind of like you're saying, he told a Chinese joke, told a black joke, and he's like, the white people in the room are looking around at the black people, see if they can laugh right now. I was like, that's so true.
And there's so much you can rip on white people for as well. So I'm totally open with that.
I mean, George Carlin has one on white people, and like
stereotypes are fine. I think those are good comedic fodder. Obviously, there is a line of where it gets hurtful or just plain mean, but like you said, it's kind of either everything is funny or nothing is funny. Like it's like you have to have a certain open policy to it. That's something that Trey Parker and Matt Stone had said previously with South Park, was either everything is funny or nothing is funny. You can't pick and choose. You have to be able to make jokes about cancer just as much as you have to make jokes about the president or whatever it is.
Or Scientology if you're chef.
Yes.
I mean, that's why chefs, that's why Isaac Hayes is no longer there.
Point. That's a perfect point in case, because Isaac Hayes, again, was there for the whole thing, like all these jokes, all these things. As soon as they touch on Scientology, dude left.
Game over.
And it's like, you can't be like that. Like, there has to be an extent where you're like, okay, it's my turn to be the butt of a joke now, and that's okay. Like, I can take the British jokes all day long. I can take
Bangers
the fat
and
jokes,
mash.
the short jokes, all that stuff. It's rare that you're going to rattle me with any kind of a joke. So.
Yeah. What's your guys' take on comedy? I'd love to know what type
favorite
of
comedian?
Favorite comedian. What type of humor do you listen to? Like I said, my favorite is probably like, I listen to majority of Blue Collar Comedy Tour. Like when they did a I can't remember what they called it, but it basically they got it back together and did another tour, and I was like, thank you, because I love that stuff. And it's, again,
I do appreciate Ron White from that group. I don't like all of them. Jeff Foxworthy is okay.
You might be a redneck.
Larry, I can't take, but Ron White to me is my favorite because he is so dry.
The problem I think I have with Larry the Cable Guy of all of them is he repeats stuff.
Yeah.
That's the issue I have with him. But I love Bill Engvall of that group is probably my favorite. And it's because he does my favorite bit he does, like most people know, is called Here's Your Sign. So he's like, I'll walk up to the counter with Band-Aids and whatever else ointment. Oh, you get hurt? Nope, just wanted to whatever it may be. Here's your sign. Like he points out the obvious situation of what's going on. Or he's like, I was in a car. He's like, I was in a car accident one time, and the dude checked on me to make sure I was okay. And he's like, the airbag was deployed. And the guy's like, you hurt? And he's like, nope, just want to take a nap on my steering wheel. Here's your sign. So things like that. He's probably my favorite of all of them. And I actually watched him in the Bill Engvall show because of that. So probably, if I had to rate the Blue Collar, it would be Bill Engvall, Jeff Foxworthy, Larry, and then Ron. I never got Ron White.
My favorite.
He's the old grouchy man.
What Ron did. He's kind of like a Texan Lewis Black.
Yeah, I love Lewis Black.
I used to like when he was. He used to talk about people saying he was ugly or whatever. He was like, "Sure, I'm ugly, but you can fix ugly. You can't fix stupid."
Yep.
And I was just like, "That's pretty smart." Yeah. So I as much as I'm maybe not the biggest Blue Collar Comedy Tour fan, I have watched it. I think Jess had a DVD copy of it back in the day.
My favorite Jeff Foxworthy bit was because NASCAR rednecks kind of go hand in hand. I think partially it's because I'm a NASCAR defender. I love my NASCAR racing, and most people don't understand. I think is what it comes down to. Like anything else, it's like I don't get why you like. I'm like, you won't. If you don't get it now, you probably won't get it. But it's one of those things where he's like, sponsors for NASCAR. He's like, could you imagine if it was like a Vagisil car? Or could you imagine like the Viagra car? What kind of windshield wipers they have on those? I was like, oh.
I had a slight amount of respect go up a notch for, is it Dale Earnhardt Jr. or whatever recently over some of the political stuff that I don't want to get into in the middle of our show.
Versus some other people in the same NASCAR scene that I was.
Yeah, I was proud
NASCAR's.
of that guy.
It's funny because NASCAR's now big business.
There was a joke about it where they said, of course, he's against it. His dad hates walls
because he died running into one. I was like that. Yeah, that one. I was like, ooh,
that was a little too soon.
That was that. Yeah. Well, it's 2001, but it's one of those things where it's like, again, that's one of those jokes you have you have the right to make it. I don't agree with it, but I'm not gonna be like, you shouldn't have made that joke.
Yeah.
So Moving on, let's talk about this middle section here, and it's getting to know us. We've not done one of these before.
No.
And the getting to know us is going to be my story of, and because I know you've wanted me for the longest time to talk about my music background and video production and all this kind of stuff.
I want to know your YouTube background.
And, well, I guess it technically was tied to YouTube, but it wasn't. I own the footage, but I did it for something else. So I worked for talking about religious, I worked for the largest Christian music festival in the New England area. That's like saying we're the biggest thing in Rhode Island.
The largest YouTube gaming channel in St. Louis.
Yes. Well, it's one of those things where, like, I mean, the New England area, there's a few up there, but obviously from the Christian music scene standpoint, you have Winter Jam is number one. It is the number one tour.
I knew what Winter Jam
period.
was.
Like, it's bigger than Lady Gaga. It's bigger than Beyonce's tour. It has more attendees than anything else. Granted, the tickets are $10.
And didn't they?
That's
the
why.
Winter Jam used to have splice in parts of like. What X Sports or Extreme Sports or whatever as well. Didn't they used to do like snowboarding on site and stuff?
Nope.
They didn't?
Nope.
I'm just imagining.
You're thinking of something else.
I might be.
But Winter Jam is the largest, like, I think it's touted as the largest traveling tour versus like a one-off or like a Lollapalooza or something like that's in one spot. So you have that. You have Creation East and Creation West, and then you have it used to be Agape, but that's ended now, sadly, because that was in Greenville. It was run by college students, and that's how people got into the industry a lot of the time. I wish they'd bring it back. Couldn't afford to do it, which sucks. But anyway, Soulfest. So the story behind Soulfest is I used to work for, as you know, D'Addario Strings, which is the world's largest guitar string manufacturer. They also make Evans drum heads, Rico Reeds.
They still the world's largest guitar string manufacturer?
Yes. I mean, they have not lost that title yet. They're the second largest drum head manufacturer. So Evans drum heads is number 2 behind Remo. And then they make Planet Waves cables. I have no idea where they are on the cable line. And then they make Rico Reeds, which doesn't really affect what my story is. And Pure Sound snare wires and HQ practice pads and all these kind of things. They make accessories for the instruments. They don't make the instruments themselves. As my dad put it, who used to work for the company as well, this is how I got the internship, was they make everything you touch on the instrument. They don't make the instrument.
Yeah.
So guitars, they'll make guitar strings. They'll make they're called, you know what a slide is? The glass slides. They'll make humidifiers, all that kind of stuff for traveling. So yeah. What'd you say?
Plectrums.
I don't know what those are.
The things you strum with.
Picks.
They're called plectrums.
Oh, the finger ones?
No.
Like banjos? Because the picks.
Pick is like the colloquialism. They're actually.
Because pick is all I know. Pick is all I know. But anyway, so it had to be like 06, it had to be 07 because we lived in New York at the time. Yeah, it had to be 07 because we lived in New York at the time, which is where they're based, is Long Island, New York. Well, big. It's 130 million when my dad started working there. I think they hit 175 million last year, which is insane. That's 8 years. It's grown that much. But my story is I needed a summer job one time, and my dad was able to get me an internship in the marketing department for D'Addario. And I started out with just filing, doing what I did. So I would get sales reports or do mailers or whatever it may be and file it, and then I would be the guy that had to go get the food for everybody.
Most kids at your age will have like a paper round at that point.
Yeah. I was working corporate.
You're working for
ironically, my first non-corporate job was, I've only had 2 non-corporate jobs. One was McDonald's, the other one's where we currently work. It's the only 2 non-corporate jobs I've had. Because before that, my dad would get me internships. He used to work for a company called SKB, which makes cases. I remember sitting there doing fucking mailers and stuffing envelopes, and it sucked. But anyways, D'Addario, I started out marketing department, and then I got the opportunity to then work in sales a little bit to kind of see the system, how it all worked. There was one specific instance where I was working with a guy who did the Guitar Center account, and I can't obviously say numbers, I'm not allowed to, but Guitar Center is a large account.
Imagine so.
They're the largest retailer in music in the U.S. So I had the opportunity to look at some of the stuff that they do, mark up the strings, kind of the discounts they get when they sell it, all this kind of stuff, and it's really interesting. But one day, because they knew outside of D'Addario that I loved editing videos, so I made stupid videos with my friends. I did class projects, all this kind of stuff.
Which I've seen evidence of.
Yes, there's actually one on my personal Facebook. One of the very first videos I ever edited, like with True Music, is on my Facebook account, and it is bad. It has the Halo theme song in the background. It's a Hamlet play reenactment. I cannot act.
I remember it. Yeah. I might even see if I can find it for this video.
I can give it to you if you don't. You can download it from Facebook. But so one day they needed somebody to fill in for a video shoot because one of the artists or one of the cameramen called out for some reason, and they needed somebody to just watch a tripod that was locked down and do this interview. Did that. They then were like, hey, do you want to edit the interview? And I was like, sure, why not? And then so I went to the art department, which I found was my favorite place. The creative people are the most fun to hang around. After hanging out with sales and marketing people, when you go to the art side, because literally the building, when you walked in, when you turned to the right, was like, you had the reception desk, then you had the meeting rooms, then you had like the sales department was the right side of the room, the marketing was left side of the room, and then the executive offices were in the back. And then they had a hallway of like the executive, like the VPs and all that were there. And then
where was this based in New York?
New York.
Okay.
And then when you walk in the building, on the left side of the room or left side of the building, you had the mail room, you had the IT R&D people. The R&D one was a real fun place to hang out in too, because there's some things I'm not allowed to talk about even to this day that I signed non-disclosures for, but it was really cool what I saw. How to manufacture strings and make them amazing. And then you had the art department over there. And the cool thing about the art department versus the sales side is the sales sides were cubicles, as they are. The art department was cubicles, but all the cubes were open, so your back was facing everybody, but it was all a giant open space with a table in the middle. And people were bringing food and all this kind of stuff, and it felt more of a collaborative thing, and the people would help each other back and forth.
Gotcha.
And it was a lot of fun. So they threw me in a corner next to the other editor. His name's John Rafferty, and I owe a lot to what I know to this guy. Final Cut 7 at the time, because I had only used Movie Maker and a little bit of iMovie up until that point.
So was it daunting for you?
Yeah, I was completely out of my element.
So when they said, like, why would they ask you, of all people, to do the editing? Just because your dad had said that you liked doing it? Or?
They asked me if I wanted to watch or learn how to edit. Not.
Do you want to see how to do it?
Okay. Yeah. Do you want to see the process? Which I thought was extremely cool.
Very nice.
So I hung out with John for a couple days, and we used the video we shot, and he showed me like how to import, how to catalog, because the way they do things, I don't know if it's the same way now. This is years ago, but they have different brands. So they have D'Addario, Evans, ProMark, like I said, and they would do like D'Addario videos are always branded DA _ whatever the video is. Evans was always EV _ what the video was, so you can catalog it. I then learned how to use the editing software, made the product, and it's really cool when you put a video online and you see it just explode and get... I mean, when I say explode, we're talking probably tens of thousands of views, and to me, that was the first time ever I'd seen that happen. Have it featured on websites, like...
Is that where you got the itch?
Yeah, you're like, I did that, and this is cool. So that's how it all started. That's literally where I got into editing, and then... Through that, my dad ended up being the head of artist relations for D'Addario, which artist relations, those of you who don't know, is basically
keep the artists happy.
Yeah, we have people in the office that are in control of getting product to artists, whether it's free and or discounted and or whatever it may be. Again, I can't talk details of that kind of thing, but they're in charge of that. And if something goes wrong, how do we get it? Like there was times there's a band that called us that. Pretty large band that called us and said, hey, we just went through our last bass drum head. It ripped on tour. They were in the middle of podunk nowhere. They had to drop ship to the venue the next day a bass drum head so they could play, because that's what you got to do to keep them happy. Especially, again, I don't want to say who it is because I don't know if I'm allowed to, but it was a band you would recognize the name for. They may or may not have been around St. Louis recently. Just FYI. So. Yeah, I'll tell you afterwards.
Okay.
So we did that, and then I had the opportunity through him doing arts relations. He then we had just gotten the music scene. So my dad pulled me into this because he knew I was a teenager. I know new music. I know bands and all this kind of stuff. And
hey, Keegan's a teenager. Why don't you bring that kid in here?
Yeah,
what's the new hotness, kid?
That you'd laugh, but that's kind of how this happened. So between him and even other people in the office would ask me what I'm listening to, because again, I'm of the generation that's seeing the new artists. Because a lot of times the artists they had that they were working with were people that had then been there for years. So like you have obviously the ones from the 70s and 80s, the big guys, so like Bon Jovi and stuff like that. So you have these guys, and they'd ask me who I should look at, and then they decided to put. I don't know the whole reasoning why this happened, but they decided to put a focus on the Christian music scene. So the Christian music scene, partially, my dad had to help make the pitch. And again, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say publicly, but basically, a lot of the quick and dirty answer is a lot of people who follow Christian artists are in a church, and people in church play music instruments for either their church or outside. Music tends to be a place where musicians gather for whatever reason.
It's a good place because
they could then sell the strings that they're making.
Smart.
So that's the business pitch they gave. Personally, for my dad, being a religious man, he wanted to get in, and he felt like those people were being overlooked when it comes to endorsement deals.
That's fair.
Like, I had the pleasure of, again, I can't talk details, but I had the pleasure of going through some people's agreements and seeing that these agreements they'd signed 6-7 years ago, what they were paying versus what their value is now. It's like, even I don't want to say it's just Christian artists, but all mainstream artists, like, that was one of the fun things I got to do, is go and update the artist roster, which you contact a lot of people that do not have listed phone numbers.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun. Like, excuse me, sir, are you so-and-so? I'm with D'Addario trying to update my records. I know this sounds like a real bad
Keegan.
bitch.
I know the new hotness. I'm here to tell you.
So anyways, we got up to Soulfest. The first year we were there, my dad just set up a tent in the artist catering area, and we were giving out, there's two things we were doing. One, we were giving out strings for, like, press reasons, like you want to get promotion. You support the artists who are there, so anybody that's there's already on the roster. But I would say, hey, do you need anything? I'm heading up there. And they got that. But then we had a tent for people to come by. And when you're in the artist area and you're giving away stuff for free, people will come talk to you. And it's really funny because the owner of the festival thought it was like the coolest thing that had happened in a long time. He's like, because he's so focused on the fans and getting paid and all that kind of stuff, and bringing in the artists is obviously something they do, but it's a business agreement versus thinking of the goodwill.
So would you think of it in terms of, like, let's say an award ceremony where the nominees, etc., they all come in and then they get to go through that kind of press room, not the press room, a room where they get goodie bags. Is it kind of like a similar thing?
Kind of,
was it like
literally
instrument goodie bags?
Literally, all it was we'd bring the top sellers, and I remember packing the damn car full of this shit. We'd bring the top sellers and just lay it out on the table and said, "Hey, what do you need?" And the Soulfest is a 3-day. It used to be 4-day. The first 2 years we did it, and then it went down to 3-day festival. And it's like, what do you need? And the only rule we had was just don't be greedy. So people would take a pack of strings or 2 packs of strings, whatever it may be. End of the week, we're like, here, take a box, because you don't want to take it back.
And you wouldn't string it for them, you'd assume.
We just give it to them, yeah.
They had someone.
Yeah, so a really cool example is a band called 10th Avenue North. And 10th Avenue North was one of they weren't the headliners, they were probably 3rd or 4th last to go on the main stage. And D'Addario at the time was working on a cable that is now out, and it was called American Stage. So one of the complaints a lot of times with cables is the quality is a bit shoddy on them. And what D'Addario said, hey, if we bring it to America, we can keep a closer eye on it. We can make it in-house instead of outsourcing it to China. And we could, since the quality is higher, we'll be able to charge a little bit more, which is because the wages are higher and all that kind of stuff. And so we had we brought prototypes, like these were prototypes of this cable. Jeff from 10th Avenue North went to go on stage. His cable that he had didn't work, and they didn't have another one. So my dad goes, go grab a cable from the table. And all we had were the American Stage ones. So I grab it, and he's like, this is a prototype. So the first one he plugs in didn't work. Like it just did not send a signal. And my dad's like, fuck, like this. Hopefully this works.
That's not good.
It's not a good sign. Well, again, but it's prototype, so it was not a finished product. Second one he got had no problem. Played the whole show on a prototype cable, which was really cool because that was, my dad used the phrase of being emergency rescue team for the artists, like whether it was drumsticks or whatever, or a drum head. Even the festival later on, they did what's called Inked by Evans, which you can put anything on a drum head, like embroidered onto it or whatever the word is. And then you had
like laminated, isn't it, or something?
No, it's actually inked into the drum head. So most places
sublamination.
Most places put stickers on.
Yeah.
Theirs is actually painted in to the head itself.
I think it's sublimation or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called. I'm sure there's some fancy word for it. But basically, we started doing that. So then D'Addario has the press because the bands, other than the 3 headliners, use the same drum kit. So you'd have the Evans head with Soulfest logo and Evans logo up there and all that kind of stuff. So I started with that. The next year, actually, side story before I get to the next year, one of my guys I knew from my church shot video for Soulfest that year. Like, it just happened to be a happenstance that he was there. And I remember seeing up on stage, and I turned to my dad, I go, I want to do that. Like, I want to go shoot with John. And obviously we couldn't because we were there for a different reason, but I was like, I want to see this happen. while I was at Soulfest, I did shoot like artist interviews for D'Addario and put them up on the website and all this kind of stuff. The guy who ran the video team for Soulfest saw my videos and saw the traction they were getting and said, hey, do you want to come work for us? Are you going to be back next year? And at this point, I didn't even think about getting paid. They didn't pay me for the first few years, and it's whatever, because I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. Like, this is cool. Like I said, I wanted to do that.
Fun thing to do.
Yeah, I want to do that role. Yeah. So my first year was very intimidating because I have 1 year of video editing under my belt. I don't really know what I'm doing. I've never used a DSLR before. I used the cameras we used in studio were actual cameras. So the guy's name is Mark Papatic. Taught me, and Kent Rich were the two that kind of took me under the wing and taught me how to use DSLRs, how to edit. Ironically, I got Ken into Final Cut 10 when that came out. He hated it at launch. Got him excited about it. So I got him into that. We then went from there, and that year I was a cameraman because I was low man on the totem pole. Went in there, and then if they needed something edited quickly, because again they had seen my work, so they knew what I could do, I would jump in and edit and put stuff together. Like we would shoot something at maybe 11 o'clock that morning that had to be on main stage by 5 p.m. that night.
Yes. Or
we could do some. The one that sucked the most was a couple years ago. We had one that we got, the ad that somebody sent us was too long, so we had to cut it down. And of course, the person who edited it is not available, so I had to cut down. I think it was called For Ryan's Guitars or something. I can't remember. But I got the video at 3 p.m. It had to be at the Jumbotron in final form by 4:30. And I was like, oh, God.
That's a deadline.
Yeah, it was. That's when you drop everything and edit. I turned to Mark and go, Mark, Dan gave me this. I'm sitting here for the next hour and a half. Yeah. I got it done, and it was up there, and it was kind of cool. It was a focal point for something I had going on for a charity. So then I was the cameraman that year. Next year, a couple people left. Turnover happened. I then became, I would call it associate editor. So me and Kent were the main two editors. Mark would run around. Mark was in charge of it.
Kind of.
Yeah. So Kent would do the interview editing. We'd do the roaming camera. I would do the roaming camera editing. So we'd go out and interview people, artists, whatever it may be, outside of the room we were in. Anything that was officially shot in the room, Kent would edit. Then the third year I was there, I was head editor, which sounds cool because it's an awesome job title. The problem with it, though, is you realize you don't leave that room. Because my favorite thing was meeting people. Like, I'm a people person. I love talking to all the artists I knew. And I conducted a lot of the interviews because I knew a lot of these people personally, just through my work at D'Addario and connections I had, and people saying, hey, have you heard so-and-so and so-and-so? I was like, no. And like, here's so-and-so. That's how I met Head, was through somebody else. Yeah. Head Welch, by the way, from Korn and or In Love and Death, I think. In Love and Death? I don't remember. So that's how I met a lot of people. And when I was head editor, it sucked because I'd be in the room from basically 9 o'clock that morning to about 3 p.m. editing the stuff we need to get done. And then we'd all go hands on deck shooting camera-wise for the headliners, because you want to get as many cameras for the big guys for promotional reasons as possible. And they had 2 stages at the same time, so you had to divide people up. The advantage of being one of the head editors, though, was the fact that I could choose where I wanted to stand. So being a drummer, I love standing up with people. So being up on stage was the coolest experience of my life, standing up there and recording them. There's a couple moments. One was with Switchfoot. I got yelled at by their tour manager, who I ended up knowing personally later on down the road. But he yelled at me because I was blocking the LED lights behind me. I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I'm new to this. But I got a cool shot of like Chad Butler, the drummer. Like, it was wide angle lens right on him. It was so cool. And one of the moments I had where I was like, why do I get to do this? Like, why am I so special? Was I was up on stage recording for, might have been David Crowder. It was either David Crowder or it was Chris Tomlin. I can't remember which. Both are 2 big names in the Christian scene. And you know how bands have the fans start singing back and the band shuts up? In the crowd, that sounds cool. On stage, it sounds incredible. Like, I remember standing there and hearing the voices coming up here, and I'm supposed to be doing my job, and I'm looking at everything through a film lens, and I'm capturing it, but I stood back and stood off the lens just to take in the moment, because I'm like, I am up on stage in front of 30,000 people recording some of the biggest artists in the Christian music scene. Like, how did this happen? And it was one of those things where you don't want to take, I mean, obviously I had the advantage of my dad getting me in the door, and I know that. But it's one of those things where you don't want to take for granted all the stuff I've been able to do because of that, because it's been a hell of a ride. It's been an experience, and I loved it. I went in 3 years from some dude, 4 years to go from some dude who did not know how to use a DSLR and edit on editing software to being the head editor at a video at one of the largest music festivals. I've also done work for Warped Tour. I've done work for Bamboozle, Linkin Park. I've done work for. It's been a lot of fun. It's an experience that I wouldn't trade for the world. It's something I absolutely love. So I don't know. I wanted to share that because I think it's a really
cool. It's a cool story, man.
Really. And I had no formal training. Everybody always asked me where did I get my degree from. I dropped out of college, and the hardest issue for me, especially when I was younger, was I would call it ageism, I guess, is where there was one time I was working Winter Jam, and again I knew probably of the 7 bands playing, I knew 6 of them personally, and one of the guys that got me all access passes because I was going to interview a few of them, and I was waiting by the VIP entrance, which was where he told me to go, and these people who were waiting to get in for VIPs, which was like hours. It's fun because I got there at 11 a.m. The doors didn't open until 3, but whatever. They asked me what I was doing with all my camera equipment. I was like, oh, I'm shooting for, and I said the names of the bands, and they kind of gave me this look of like, you're only like 17. Who the hell are you? And then the tour manager comes out and lets me in, and I would love to look back to see what their face was because I got that a lot of like, who the hell is this kid? And that's where I kind of that's why I owe a lot to Kent and Mark, because Kent and Mark have a very strong resumes. They have done feature-length films. They've done a lot of big productions. I had not done any of that, and I owe a lot to them for, A, allowing me to do it, and B, trusting me and teaching me what I needed to do. That was probably the part where I was just like, thank you, because I would not have been able to do what I do now if it wasn't for them. So that was...
I mean, this whole thing started as you looking for an excuse to do more editing.
Yeah, which is ironic because I don't edit anything anymore.
I edit everything. Which is fun because you're passing on the
torch.
Information that you learned off the back of nothing is getting passed on to me. So I'm
onto the back of nothing.
I'm gonna be head editor of
Level
Atheist
2
Fest.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know. That was just something I wanted to share because it's a cool, interesting experience, and I've had many, as you know, and I don't want to get into all of them here because we're already running late on time, but like, I've had a lot of experiences that I would not have had otherwise if it wasn't for the Soulfest. Soulfest kind of opened up that door, and my dad put it best because I thanked him many times for getting me in the door, and the way he puts it is, I opened the door for you, but you kicked it off the hinges. Yeah. He's like, you ran with that. Even to this day, like, when I made the decision, and it was not an easy decision to make, to stop doing what I was doing, partially because of travel, partially because of YouTube. I was just fed up with YouTube at the time because they'd taken down my channel, and it's just like, what the fuck am I doing? What am I doing?
Actually, really want to hear at some point.
Yeah, I don't know if that one is that one hurts. Yeah. But the decision to end it was the hardest in my family to this day. Like, my sister will still say, my dad said this a couple days ago when I called him. He's like, you guys, you had something here and you were running with it, and you kind of just let that all slip away. And it's like, I know I'd lost the motivation to do it, and traveling sucks. Interviews are fun. Meeting people is fun, but also at some point, it's going to sound really bad or really narcissistic when I say it, but at some point you've done it all and you're seeing the same people over and over again. It's like, you don't get that next big fish of like excitement. Like, I've interviewed Skillet for the 6th time. Like, what else can I ask them that I don't know? Or I can ask them about their new album, but I've already asked the questions I care about and the people care about. Yeah. So interviewing, you've seen me interview people, and
well, I was going to say that, like, the stuff that you learned during that period of your life definitely helps massively with our stuff because of your confidence level, and that's, you gave me the confidence to edit and to you were, constructive criticism here, there, and everywhere, and it all helps. And
because that's what I got growing up.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the big thing.
No, it's perfect because hopefully now everything that you're seeing now and for the last week or so that's been put out is 100% edited by me, and I am someone that literally had 0 editing experience until Keegan sort of taught me a few bits and pieces, and now I can do chroma key and all this kind of weird shit that I never thought I'd be able to do, and then I can use that in other aspects of my life as well. I edit for fun now, occasionally.
The next thing I'm going to teach you is how to interview somebody off the cuff.
Yeah,
like that's one thing. Mark,
I'm really bad at that.
When I interviewed a few bands, because like, so when you go in a little behind the scenes, and then I'll let you get to your topic here. Sure. But I feel like I'll end with this.
That's right.
When you go to interview,
we're talking for an hour solid.
Yeah. when you go to interview anybody, specifically I want to say bands because that's what I did this for. Yeah. Is you would go in and you have a list of things you want to talk about. So like for Soulfest, they always had a theme every year. So you always ask, what is, like they had one, True Love Prevails. What does True Love Prevails mean to you? And you've got to do the, you got to do the candid questions. But I'd learned very quickly, and part of it's from my dad critiquing, because I used to ask a question and then ask a question, get a more specific answer. He's like, just ask the first question, see what the answer is, and then determine where to go from there. And that's probably the best piece of advice he's ever given me professionally, because instead of thinking, what's the next question I'm going to ask, or how do I get the answer I want, let's just ask a question, have a conversation. So one of the ones I remember asking all the time, just to throw people off, was guilty pleasure TV shows. Like, bands don't ever get asked their guilty pleasure TV shows or guilty pleasure music. Well, music's a little bit more, but cartoons, whatever it may be. Or if you could be in any cartoon or any cartoon character, who would you be?
So you go for the more interesting kind of answers.
Yeah, on top of obviously the answers you have to get, because there's certain things you do have to get. And there was one moment where, especially with the guilty pleasures, it starts off, especially when if you have the whole band. One dude will say something, then somebody else will call somebody else out on something else, and it just keeps going. It's like, I don't have to do any of that, and it sparks itself.
That's clever.
You're really good at putting people at ease. Like Mark said to me, he's like, you're so relaxed when you do it, and you're so... You get to know the person behind the music. You don't get to know the music for the camera. And I was like, that's what I want. I want to get to know who Alex from More of Ages is, or who Toby Mac is. People know about their music.
I think a lot of that, though, also stems from the fact that the people that you were interviewing were possibly more down to earth than some of the people that we interview. I always have an easier time interviewing developers than celebrities, because, like with Matt Ryan, having a personal stake in that type of, like me literally being a fanboy,
I could
crushed
see it.
me. And
I don't fucking know who you are.
I mean, it worked out great, but except for the Welsh thing. But I got to ask some of the questions I really wanted to ask. I got some great answers. And we have our mini focuses. Like, we will always try and ask whoever we're talking to about VR in some size, shape, or form.
So you have the questions you always ask.
Yeah, because that's our thing. But like when you're talking to developers, I find that they're just so excited to talk about their project and their goals and stuff, that I was more able to be off the cuff. Especially at Pixel Pop, like, I didn't write down a single question. I just would go in there. I'd have a couple things in my head, like, okay, what is the game? What's it about? When's it coming out? What platforms is it on? Like, that type of stuff. Outside of that,
and it's the information you have to get.
It was just running off of, like, why did you make this particular aesthetic choice or whatever. And
for us, I think it's partially for what the video's intended purpose is. So obviously, if we're interviewing Matt Ryan, or if we're interviewing some Lauren Lester or Kevin Conroy, they're not gaining anything from us. We're getting a lot more from them than they are from us. And it's more of that we're doing it not to boost numbers, because it's not the right phrase, but it's going to give us a bigger boost than the indie developers.
Yeah, it's a high-profile name, and you're asking them questions that are relevant to our topic of discussion.
Versus, like, I feel like if you're going to interview indie developers it's the same thing. Like, if you're interviewing just to get their story out, it's a different one than if you're interviewing somebody to answer questions. And I feel like a lot of times with the bigger ones, and I do this all the time, is you get them to answer questions that are relevant, that people care about, because the bigger reach.
You want them to enjoy it.
Yes.
You don't want them to feel like they are getting hammered by the media. You want them to have a conversation, and then you're going to get the best, most comfortable answers usually.
And learning to listen to what they say when they say it. Like, you pick up little nuggets that you're like, ooh.
It's definitely something that I think I'm getting better at, but I definitely have a long way to go. Like,
I mean, I've been doing this for over 10 years. That's the other thing. Like, I've been doing, like I said, it's 2017. I've been doing this since 2007. Yeah. I've been doing it over 10 years professionally.
In various different arenas.
In various different arenas and various different forms. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
That was the getting to know me in Soulfest.
Getting to know Keegan.
And Soulfest.
Getting to know.
Soulfest still goes on. If you guys want to look it up, it's thesoulfest.com. If you're interested in that at all, they do. They do it every August. They just announced Skillet will be there next year, which it really sucks. Last thing I'll say, and then we can finally move on. Is it really sucks now, because I get emails from these people saying, "Hey, are you going to be here?" And I was like, I haven't done this for a few years now. I want to. I miss seeing people more than I miss doing the work itself and traveling. So, like, my buddy John, who did tech work for Sick Puppies, then he did tech work for Skillet. He's the former bassist of The Almost. I met him years ago, and we still we're playing Xbox here in a couple weeks. Like, I miss hanging out with people from that industry.
Well, we've kind of talked about it a little bit. It's in some way of potentially bringing some of your friends into the show.
The hardest part is getting time.
Yeah, time is a big one
because they travel.
But like actually having some of those guys join us for live streams and stuff, because you do know a lot of very interesting people that have a lot of interesting stories, and I'd love to have that kind of presence on a live stream. I think it'd be great.
There's a couple of people I know right now. If I asked, they would be all in. And I've put out feelers, and most people are interested. It's just nailing down time has been the hardest thing. Yeah.
Which I mean that's the same for us, whether they're musicians or not. Is finding time. Like, we're still supposed to be interviewing so large personalities in the YouTube arena, which we haven't had time to settle with, and developers as well. We're still looking for time for that, but hopefully that's all going to sort of come to fruition with the more and more free time that we're getting. But yeah.
Anyways, what's your Tom's tale for this week?
So my tale, and I'll try and keep it a little short, but
I kind of went on for an hour.
No, you're good. So what I wanted to talk about, it took me a little while because I went
I don't even know what your tale is.
Heavy emotion last week. So this week I thought I'd go with something a little bit more kind of trivial and just kind of fun to talk about.
Somebody commented last week, by the way, about, I think it was James, was like, he found it touching when I asked you what your headspace was. And I was like, that was an honest question. I didn't know where the hell he was.
Very sweet. Thank you, James. And you for asking.
Yeah.
No, so instead of that, what I wanted to talk about was something that I grew up during, and I thought that you might find interesting because you were too young. And that is console wars, the original console wars. So as those of you that know me or grew up with me will know, my first ever I don't want to say it was a console, but it was kind of a console. It was a Commodore 64. And at the time,
64 megahertz, I believe, is what that stood for.
Fucking know. The Commodore 64, we already discovered
kilohertz, probably.
With our fun facts like a week or so ago, the Commodore 64 had less power than a Texas Instrument calculator. But it used to go up against the Spectrum, which was
I didn't even know what that is.
It's an English-made console.
And so I know the Commodore. I don't know what the Spectrum is.
Yeah, well, the Atari was in the mix too, but the Commodore versus the Spectrum was the big one in England because those were like two completely separate made, but they played very similar games, and it was like you were this side or this side. But it was never like, I don't remember it being like, oh, you're a Commodore scrub, or you know what I mean? Like, it was never like that. It was more just kind of like, which one do you choose? Like, for funsies. It was never like mean. It didn't get mean until Genesis or Mega Drive in England versus SNES or Super Nintendo. Whichever way you say it, because the Nintendo pretty much broke the market of like the Commodore and everything else. It was like
Nintendo
NES came out,
at one point the NES owned, I think, 92% of market share for video games.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that went against the NES, the only thing in England that went against it was the Master System, which was Sega's first foray.
And it did better overseas than it did in the US.
True. But so the Master System was good, not great. It did have some classic games on it. Alex Kidd is the one that springs to mind, and there was some other good ones on there. To this day, I still want to track one down just to play Alex Kidd. But so the Master System was the big one, and I distinctly remember, and I think I've told this story before, but I distinctly remember the Mega Drive was out, or the Genesis, and I wanted one, but being the kind of wonderful son that I was.
You told this on the Getting to Know Tom way back when.
Yeah, I asked for the Master System instead of the Mega Drive because I thought the Mega Drive would be too expensive for my folks.
Consoles were always expensive.
They were. And it's funny because they, like, even with inflation and everything, they're basically still the same price.
Yeah.
But yeah, so at the time, the Genesis was like $300 or something, or £300, I suppose.
And this was in the 90s.
This is back in the 90s. And so I was like, you know what? You can probably get a Master System for like $150. Like, I'm okay with that. I just want something to play games on because I love my Commodore 64, but the Commodore was not really... it
was on its way out.
Yeah, it was on its way out, and it wasn't really a controller-based system, and I liked the NES,
if you'd stuck with it, you probably would have keyboard and moused.
Maybe I could play CS:GO finally.
Yeah.
Which is my life goal at this point.
That's where your life ended, Tom.
My life goal is to play CS:GO with a keyboard and mouse. I'm not joking.
We'll do a series. Is it on Mac?
It's on Mac.
We'll do a series on. I'll find a way to fix plugins, and we'll record that, and we'll do a series of you learning how to play CS:GO.
That'd be great.
That's the thing.
I'd love to do that. I watch so much of it, and I'm just like, I know everything about that game and how to be like a super pro player, but I've just never had the opportunity to
do it.
to play it because I can't do keyboard and mouse.
Yeah.
So that being said, it turns out that my folks decided to get me a Mega Drive or Genesis instead of the Master System. I just want to say fuck you to that random number that called me and screwed up my notes. And so I had the Mega Drive and I lost my mind. I was like, oh my god, like I can't believe I got this machine. I was not expecting it. And this was 16-bit versus 8, so that was a big jump for the time.
It's twice as many bits.
Twice as many bits.
And then we did another quadruple jump to the 64.
Well, there was a 32 in the middle, which I'm actually going to talk about.
Yeah, but it didn't last very long.
Not at all. So the idea, of course, was that back then, console wars were kind of different to how they are now. Nowadays, most gamers grew up to the point where they got their love for video gaming when they were my age, when they were younger, and then now they have real jobs and they can afford to potentially own more than one console. I'm sure many of you watching at home or listening at home have more than one console. I personally right now have obviously all the retro shit that we use occasionally for the show, but my own,
that was a push we had for a while.
Dude, I still want to get back into that. I love playing that shit. But yeah, we have a bunch of retro stuff, but the stuff that I actually play, I have a PlayStation 4 and a Switch. I do not have an Xbox One, but we have an Xbox One technically for the channel. So you have
my house,
that, and your PS4 and a Wii U. It's last gen, but still, you know, and you're planning on getting a Switch with the Odyssey bundle, correct?
Hopefully, that's my goal.
So, so that being said, like I'm at an age where I can afford to do that and have multiple consoles. Back then, that was not happening.
Didn't have a job.
No, I distinctly remember at one point selling my bike to buy a copy of Streets of Rage 2. And my bike was like just a shitty whatever bike, and I sold it for
Huffy?
like I don't remember what it was.
I hope it's a Huffy.
I sold it for £45, which was enough for me to pick up Streets of Rage 2. I was a huge Streets of Rage fan, and honestly, worth it. In retrospect, worth the trade. So yeah, so I was like heavy into it, dude. It was like a drug habit for me, which didn't bode well for later life. But yeah, like I was super into it, and I would always argue, but you would argue with your friends, right? There was no internet, so there was no like there was no like toxic culture like that we talked about the other week. There was none of that toxicity. It was just like you and your friends would have different consoles, and if you had different consoles, you would shit on the other console.
Well, the other thing you ran into with that too is like you'd have different consoles, but you'd also go to somebody's house to play the other console.
Which
too.
is
like
the point I wanted to make.
So there was like you defended your decision,
yes,
but you also wanted to play the other one.
Everyone
secretly.
always defends their decision, and that's totally fine. That still happens to this day. But yes, in that instance, in those days, I remember this was more so after the Genesis and SNES stuff. But when they got to like the PlayStation and the Saturn and that kind of stuff, Dreamcast, there was a lot of decisions that went into picking up consoles that revolved around you having discussions with your friends, and you would be like, okay,
are you getting this one?
We're all going to get a console for Christmas. What should we get? And we'd be like, well, I like this genre more, or I like this franchise more, so I'm going to get this, and then you can get that. So like I would buy a Saturn, my buddy would buy a PlayStation, someone else would buy whatever else, and it wasn't really until the N64 came out where everyone was just like universally like, fuck yes, we're all getting one.
Yeah. Because 4-player.
Because 4-player, and bring your controller to your friend's house. But yeah, so yeah, you're absolutely right. There was this kind of like, as much as there was this defending your purchase and that kind of stuff, there was also this level of how do we get to play the largest variety of games as friends, which was I'm going back to like I'm getting weepy-eyed, like Stand By Me, like nostalgia.
Well,
right
even with the same like I remember going, my buddy Will back in the day, we had N64, so that was the console. Like I remember the Crash Bandicoot yelling at Nintendo commercials. That's the first one I remember of like for console wars. I don't remember the Nintendo does or Genesis does what Nintendo don't. I just know it retroactively.
Yeah.
But I remember going with Will, like I was always a sports gamer, and I always had sports games. I always had Mario Party because I had my sister, so we had some of those games. Going to Will's house, Will didn't really play with his siblings, so he had like he had GoldenEye, first of all, so he was king.
Right.
GoldenEye, he had the Star Wars Shadows of the Empire.
Shadows of the Empire.
Like that was one I remember going to. Clay Fighters 63.5. I remember going to that. Like I remember him, and then I think I got Tony Hawk 1, but he got Tony Hawk 2, and you would trade games. And
well, yeah, that was the other part of it too. Was like I said, like it didn't even necessarily. If you did end up getting the same consoles, it would be those types of decisions based on games too. Like
this is pre-GameStop or GameStop.
Yeah,
Blockbuster.
Yeah, pre-blockbuster carrying games anyway. But yeah, you would like if a couple games were coming out and you had your eyes on a particular one. Like if we both wanted to play Streets of Rage and we both wanted to play Street Fighter, we would just say, okay, I'll get Streets of Rage, you get Street Fighter, and then we'll play them together, and then we can swap them, and and because there wasn't really anywhere to trade your game in at the time. Like we used to buy games from local flea markets back when the Saturn was a thing. I used to walk 3 miles to the local flea
uphill
market.
both ways.
It was uphill one way, downhill the other. But no joke, like it was this gigantic fucking hill. It wasn't snowing though, and there was this one guy that was always there for a trade, and you could he would take games that you traded in, and then he would let you have credit to get extra games. And I picked up some of the best games I ever played there, like Guardian Heroes, which is a game that now costs like $300 to buy, but at the time it was something I traded in for at this flea market, and so I
because it was new,
fun memories.
Well, newish.
But it was like it was like one of those import type situations, which I'm still apparently a fan of. But yeah, so you had that, and then of course you had the a separate byline of that, which was the Mascot Wars, which was kind of similar in principle to the console wars, except it was less about how many. What the graphics processor is
the
like.
blast processor.
Kind of shit. But it was more just like, okay, which is the more enjoyable character? And that was obviously at that time Sonic versus Mario. It was huge. It was just Sonic versus Mario. I even remember. I
mean, Mario clearly wins that battle.
Yeah, in the long term, yes. In the short term, it was touch and go for a minute. But yeah, I remember when they first released. I think it was on the Wii, Nintendo. It was Mario versus Sonic at the Olympics or whatever, which was the
Mario and Sonic at the Olympics.
Yeah, which was like the first game that they were in the same game, and I was like, holy shit! I never thought I'd see this.
Is he not in Smash Bros?
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
Yeah,
I would have thought of all the franchises that would have been the one that brought him.
Yeah,
together.
they brought him into that weird Olympic game thing for Wii. But I remember thinking, like, man, I never thought I'd live to see the day. Like, it was a weird moment for me. Everyone else was just like, whatever.
Yeah,
it's a shitty Olympic game. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, these guys were like, you would fight to the death for your character. I bought the first edition of Sonic the comic. I used to draw Sonic all the time because he was my guy. I used to,
sorry.
I would learn all that stuff. Now, I didn't hate Mario. I enjoyed Mario quite a lot. Whenever I got a chance to play it, but Sonic was the one I had, and I learned to love it from a young age. So, which is, I still haven't played Sonic Mania, and I'm really excited to pick that up for the Switch. And,
well, I think it's interesting because like I was too young for that generation, but I have visions of I talked about when I go to Grandma's house. She had the Super Nintendo. Super Nintendo was Grandma. I would go to my babysitter who had a Genesis. She had Sonic. Like I remember having both in my life. And not having to make the decision on that console.
Oh, yeah.
I always just hated PlayStation, so that's fine. So I just got an N64. And I don't know if that hate for PlayStation just because I love Mario that much.
Well, PlayStation broke away from Nintendo, didn't they? That was originally supposed to be a Nintendo.
Well, I didn't know that at the time. I found that later on. But I think that's partially because they were more adult games, and I was not the age for the adult games yet. I was still a kid.
You know what the most common kind of argument was for your console, though, that people use more than anything else? The controller.
I hated the N64 controller.
See what I'm saying? It was weird because like there was so many people that like that was their reasoning. Like it wasn't anything to do with the games. It wasn't anything to do with the console power. It was like I prefer the controller. And I think definitely through the PlayStation Xbox era that was the thing. That's still a thing.
I think
that's
the
number
Xbox
one complaint you get.
Better.
There's the number one complaint you get from someone that's playing from the other console is that there's controllers that feel right to them and those that don't. I think like the Saturn had a ridiculous controller and there was some other stuff, but as far as like Genesis versus
the dog bone was a good design.
The SNES.
The Genesis, I can see that because Genesis to me reminds me of like a Batarang, and I always felt weird holding it with 3 buttons because I'm so used to the 4.
Well, that's the thing. Like not halfway, but like kind of
6.
when Street Fighter came out. Very shortly after Street Fighter 2, they released the 6-button controller, which was to contend largely with SNES, which had originally had 4 again, but then did 2 extra for Street Fighter. Yeah. So like this game dictated these fucking controllers because it was that popular. And the trigger buttons, it was always like, how do they feel? Do they feel good?
Genesis didn't have triggers, did they?
Yeah, they did.
Oh, I
Yeah,
don't
they
remember.
did. They just
I never
weren't-
really played
they
it
were
outside
not
of Sonic.
quite as triggery, I don't think, as
Yeah.
as the Mega Drive ones, but that just could be my personal recollection. But yeah, when you got the 6-button controllers in for games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and that kind of stuff, the fighting games basically
Yeah.
brought about the 6-button thing. And then since then, we've dropped back, obviously, and we have
only-
4 main buttons, but then we have 2
The
triggers.
only redesign I remember is the Duke to the S on the original Xbox.
Correct.
In a smaller.
Yeah.
And I remember the black and white buttons moving. I was like, at first I hated it, but then you're like, oh, you get used to it.
I
eventually.
hated the Duke. Whenever anyone gave it to me to play, I was like, because I have small hands,
Yeah.
and I was just like, this
I
is
love it
fucking
now that I'm older.
ridiculous.
When I was
Like,
a kid, I hated it.
Yeah.
But now that I'm older, I remember
It
playing.
just, I get the
fucking-
idea behind it. It was supposed to be some kind of a weird joystick hybrid, but it just didn't really work out for me. I was never a fan of that controller, and I don't dislike. I like the 360 controller, but it was almost too thick. Like I think
Oh, I
the
love the
PlayStation
360.
controllers are thinner, which is why I like them.
I hate the feel of the DualShock.
You don't like
Like
it?
even the DualShock 4 when I played the Xbox One, I prefer the triggers on the DualShock 4, but the feel of the Xbox One I love. It just again partially because I was an Xbox guy from Xbox One or the original Xbox and then Xbox 360. Like that's the one I grew up with, so that to me felt natural. And I never played Sony. I mean, I never played Sony honestly until probably Xbox 360 era. I got a PS1 for our car. Maybe a little bit before that then. And it felt weird. It felt out of place. And I remember having the obviously I was used to the analog, but having the 2 analog sticks on the same row felt off because I was so used to the off-center ones. So,
Yeah.
I
The N64, I think,
You get used to
divided everyone.
You get
'cause
used-
everyone hated
yeah.
that universally. But
but it did so much when it
worked
came to like, because if you think about it, the second joystick came from the C buttons.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, I mean the way that now that we have this kind of the setups that we have, that all draws through the history of controllers back down to the N64, which was a brave design decision. Other small, seemingly trivial things that set these guys apart were the cartridge boxes, because it seems weird, but that was, again, it was an aesthetic thing. It was a small difference, but for a lot of people, that was a big deal. So you have the SNES boxes.
I don't remember the Genesis ones.
The Genesis ones were hard shell cases.
So they lasted longer.
They were generally prettier.
You know how hard it is to find a
The SNES ones
box?
were exactly the same.
The cardboard.
As the N64 ones. They
Yeah.
were just a piece of cardboard with the disc inside. Oh, I'm sorry, the cartridge inside. And I did not like the SNES boxes at all. I hated that they like fell apart. They started out like that, like what you're looking at right now, and I'll have some images behind us. Those are the ones I remember. The ones that were actually snap shell cases. They were like VHS, but they did have some cardboard ones.
God,
at the
they're so
beginning.
big.
Yeah, but
I guess because you have to put a card in there.
yeah, but you had to. I mean, there was plenty of extra space that wasn't needed in
Yeah.
there. But yeah, you would just stack them up and put them on your shelf like VHS or whatever.
Which is what we do now.
Which is what we do now.
Well,
and
except for digital now. You stack it on a virtual
the
shelf.
boxes are definitely sort of trimmed down in size, which is nice. But yeah, that was a big part of it. It's like, honestly, a lot of people like base their decisions over aesthetic things like that, like how do these SNES boxes look versus how do these Mega Drive or Genesis boxes look. And then you talk about some add-ons here because the Mega Drive.
Sega knew how to do add-ons, not very well.
Sega went
They
add-on
did a lot
crazy. They decided they wanted to try and up the power level of the Genesis, so they made the 32X, which was basically a little spaceship thing that sat inside the regular cartridge connection for your Genesis and allows you to play games in apparently 32-bit, which was really only like 3 games ultimately, I think, that ended up taking advantage of it. There was not that many that took advantage of it. So I remember, I think Sonic versus Knuckles was one of the first ones that I remember. There was like 32X, and then of course they had the Sega CD, which was, I mean, it was interesting. We've already discussed things like Night Trap and all that kind of weird CGI stuff on this show before, but again, it was a case of like Sega. They would constantly throw these weird like peripheral things at their console, but they never really bothered putting too much effort into making many more consoles. And then when they did eventually come out with their next step,
They're like, we're back where we just were, because now everybody's just adding stuff into things.
It didn't do so great. which would be the Dreamcast, which was again a solid console, but you know, when your console is defined by like 3 games, then that's a loss. That's not, you're not winning at that point. And then of course Nintendo would go on to eventually become market leaders. They're still to this day obviously in the top 3, and largely, almost entirely, in fact, just due to a few key franchises that they treated really, really well throughout the years. Your Zeldas, your Marios, your kart racing games, like that stuff is the stuff that has kept Nintendo afloat. Ultimately, that did not happen for Sonic when he went to Dreamcast, which is why Sonic did not
make the 2 to 3D jump very well.
He did not. You're absolutely right. So even though I am ridiculously excited about Sonic Mania,
what's a 2D game?
Yeah,
with 3D elements.
That's what I'm saying. It's like everyone sort of says it's like if you're a Sonic fan, this is the shit that you want, and so I'm excited to get back into it because I really I went for like every secret in the Sonic games. I was a huge fan. And they even had like do you remember Game Genies? Was that a thing when you were?
I had a Game Shark, but not a Game Genie. Similar. I know what they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember I was too young for
They were
Game
huge.
Genies.
Yeah. I used to. So and this is a true story. I used to go. I had so many magazines that I would buy, like subscriptions to CVG, which was Computer Video Games.
I know you're old. You had magazines.
Yeah,
the only magazine I ever had was Sports Illustrated because they gave me baseball cards.
Oh, I had
or Sports Illustrated for
Games
kids.
Master, CVG, anything with video games on it I would buy, and I did that until I was really old, actually. And what I would do is each of these magazines would have a cheat section, so I started a binder of cheats for different games.
I have a folder similar to that,
Really?
but it's not from magazines. It's from, there's a website, I assume it's still a website, cheatcc.com.
Okay.
I would print out, the first game I did it for was GTA, because you could spawn in the vehicles. So
Right.
I have a folder that says Xbox cheat codes handwritten on the front of it, and it slowly just expanded.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had, like, mine was like a scrapbook version of that.
Yes, because you were older. Yeah.
But I would lend it to friends and stuff. They'd be like, "Oh man, do you know how to get past that level and whatever?" And I'd be like, "Let me check my manual here and just kind of see if I can find it."
still does exist, but
That's
it looks
awesome.
like they do game reviews and not cheat code, which is weird because the name of your website is.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
But I don't think there's cheat codes that exist anymore. Like
most of the cheat stuff nowadays is like it's actually built into the options.
It's DLC.
It's very rare that they have like a code or something that you have to do. But yeah, so I just wanted to talk about that whole era a little bit because it's a nostalgic like thing for me. I loved Nintendo growing up. I loved playing Mario Kart, Super Mario, like over my friends' houses and stuff. I also just really, really loved my Genesis, and there was so many like solid games for the Genesis that to this day I would still play happily. And I just thought it's interesting, sort of the evolution of the console war from back when it was like Commodore versus Spectrum, and no one really gave two shits. The Mega Drive / Genesis versus SNES was probably the biggest and baddest console war that I ever remember happening until you got into the PlayStation versus Xbox stuff. And it was cute because I remember I was a little older at that time and I could see all the kids arguing about PlayStation versus Xbox, and I was like, shit, I remember doing this with my Mega Drive versus the SNES, and it seemed like such a weird concept for me to grasp.
I very much was, I mean, it's weird because I tend to go based on where my friends are.
Right.
Obviously, like I said before, I was an Xbox fan and then Xbox 360, which was the right decision at the time because A, everybody was there, and B, it had the games I wanted. The reason I hung out or stayed away from Sony, and I still kind of don't feel like I fit in 100% on the Sony platform, is the weird Japanese games and first-party single-player narratives. I could care less. I'm definitely a cross-platform guy or multiplayer game guy. So to me, it didn't really matter.
You've gotten a lot more into indies. If you remember when we started this show, you didn't really play anything except for sports games.
Yeah, but I don't think I'll ever play single-player. Like Horizon is probably a fantastic game. I will never finish it. Yeah, but that's different. That's Mario. Like to me, that's different than like realistic because it's a nostalgia feeling with Mario going on. Even Super Mario Sunshine, I never finished. I think it's the only Mario game I've never finished. But like I just feel out of place with like Last of Us and Uncharted. Like they're great games, and I watch YouTube videos of people watching or playing them, but I don't think I would enjoy them because I don't have the patience to do it. And the reason I like indie games a lot now is because I can finish them in
quick and dirty.
Yeah, 2 to 3 days.
Solid point.
Versus then social gaming. Like when I go home,
you want to hang out with friends and play games.
Playing Destiny, probably potentially streaming it. I don't know yet. I haven't decided yet. We'll see how I feel. I almost threw up earlier, so that was fun.
You did.
I was like, oh.
It's been a long, hot day, guys.
Yeah, it's toasty.
In this basement. So that's it. I just want to talk a little bit about console wars. And, of course, I would love to know your stories of the console wars. We know what our audience is. We know your average age. So we know that at least some of you have lived to survive the Genesis / Mega Drive versus SNES wars. And then maybe you remember more distinctly the PlayStation versus Xbox. What was that like? What was your reasoning for sticking with your console? What type of things did you say to your opponent when you were arguing about
You know what I find really interesting now that I think about it? When the Xbox was announced, I made jokes because, of course, Microsoft's trying to get into gaming, and it's so dumb. And then I bought the console, and I fell in love with it. Fell in love with it. And it was, I think I've told this story before, but I remember getting it because I think I got it for my birthday.
Yeah, you did a whole
because
on this.
my mom spent a lot of money on it, and I was just like, it's when I grew up playing video. That's when I found Halo, and I was like, hell yeah! Literally in my basement it was Xbox with Halo. Right next to it was a mini basketball hoop that kept score, like those little Tykes ones. Me and my friends played the crap out of that.
Play with like one hand and shoot with the other.
Yeah, I was also a plug and play person.
Super.
But yeah, I don't remember PlayStation. Like I just ignored PlayStation because I was like, this is dumb. I also remember the other turning off factor from PlayStation 2 is the switch being on the back.
Well, the other thing...
That power switch was dumb being on the back.
For the original PlayStation, the thing that put that on the map for me was Resident Evil because...
Again, I was too young.
I wasn't really a fan of like things like Ridge Racer or whatever, and then my buddy got Resident Evil, the first one, and I remember playing through it. Like, we played through it. I was the wingman, basically. I was too scared to play it, which, different nowadays. But I was too scared to play it, but he would play it, and I would basically be by his side just like keeping track of what was going on, trying to solve puzzles in my head and being like, oh, you need to go back to this room, and kind of while he was just trying to survive, basically. Yeah. I remember it took us like 30 tries to kill the giant snake in the first game and stuff, and those are the types of memories.
I think it's funny because the consoles that like gamers remember fondly, so like the GameCube, I never had. Like that was one. Like that was my sister.
The one we bought for our retro gaming is the first time I've ever.
Yeah, I just never. The people are like the GameCube library is so good, and I'm like, it had Mario Party. I remember my sister had it, so I played it.
I don't know whether it's just because I'm not seeing the right games, but whenever I go into a retro game store to try and buy games and I look for GameCube stuff, it's all like
you're looking in the wrong place.
There's
Tom.
nothing.
You're looking in the wrong place, Tom.
I guess so.
I'll show you the right place when we're done recording this,
which is now, I think. So. Yeah. We went a little long on this one. Sorry about that, guys. Hope you still dug it. So this has been episode what now?
41
of
I just said episode 1 is like that's not
the
right.
official Level 2 podcast, where we basically talk shit for a while and talk about our lives and YouTube and love and loss and video games. And we'd like to thank you for tuning in. We also like to thank you for tuning in for Indie Please Add Details every Wednesday and Codename Morpheus, our VR podcast, every Thursday. We will have some independent gameplay going up. In case you haven't noticed, whenever we record a game to put on this TV behind us, if you're watching the video, we tend to take that footage and then create a no commentary gameplay video for you just to kind of watch what we're doing as we go through these games.
And hopefully it look like we know what we're doing. Because when we stop, it is when we stop knowing.
I have been known to edit out some of my worst moments in those gameplays. But yeah, so thanks so much for listening. We love you guys so much. Your support means the world to us. We're at like what? 1K and 60-ish around now.
I have no idea.
Yeah, so thank you so much for vibing with us, and that's about it. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and as always,
welcome to the second level.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level.